What if pain isn't the problem, but actually the pathway back to you? You're listening to The Leadership Wound, From Pain to Permission. I'm Amanda Rohr, your host and founder of Authentically You, coaching for embodied spiritual living and leading. This is where we get honest about the real cost of leadership, the burnout, the pretending, the rejection, and the return to your authentic self. Because this isn't about performance, it's about permission. Welcome to the leader you've always been. Because we need to normalize that word wound. So many of us carry shame around our wounds. We're afraid to say we have any or admit what they are. We get this survival of the fittest mindset, and we think that to admit that we are tired, exhausted, hurt, or disappointed somehow means that something is wrong with us and we're exempt from leading. We assume that to have wounds means we did something wrong, and that if we were better leaders, more mature, more spiritual, we wouldn't have gotten them in the first place. But that's simply not true. Wounding is baked into the cake of leadership and baked into the reality of being human. And the more we can admit this, the better off we'll be to healing our wounds and moving on from them. Welcome back to the Leadership Wound podcast, where we talk about the hidden cost of leadership. I'm Amanda Rohr, leadership and embodiment coach and founder of Authentically You, coaching for embodied spiritual living and leading. And I'm your host for today's conversation. Over the past few weeks, we just wrapped up a powerful 4-part series called The Leadership Wound Healing Path, where we explored what it really looks like to feel, name, accept, and tend the wounds that we carry in leadership. If you missed any of those episodes, I encourage you to go back and listen. It's some of the most honest and healing work I've shared so far, and it just might meet you exactly where you are. But today, I want to offer you something different, something you might not have heard before. And that is, no matter who you are and what you are doing, you're already a leader. Not because someone gave you a title, not because you have a platform, but because you carry influence. Every one of us is influencing someone else through our presence, our decisions, our silence, our courage, and our values. Leadership is happening whether we call it that or not. And the real question is, what will you do with that influence? Will you ignore it? Will you shrink back from it because of fear or past wounds or insecurities? Or will you begin to steward it? Will we live aligned with the voice of God within us and let that voice shape how we show up for others? Because here's the truth. When you begin to live authentically, when you start to speak, act, or serve in ways that reflect who God created you to be, you will become visible. And with visibility comes risk. Because influence, real influence, often comes with wounds. And I want to pause here for a moment, because we need to normalize that word wound. Let's be honest. Most of us didn't get hurt in leadership because we were leading poorly. We got hurt because we dared to show up, because we spoke when others stayed silent, because we led in ways that didn't fit the mold, because we made someone uncomfortable simply because we were being ourselves. But friend, that wounding doesn't mean you're not a leader. It probably means you are one. It means you've been visible, courageous, and honest. And the world needs more of that, not less. But so many of us carry shame around our wounds. We're afraid to say we have any or admit what they are. We get this survival of the fittest mindset, and we think that to admit that we are tired, exhausted, hurt, or disappointed somehow means that something is wrong with us and we're exempt from leading. We assume that to have wounds means we did something wrong, and that if we were better leaders, more mature, more spiritual, we wouldn't have gotten them in the first place. But that's simply not true. Wounding is baked into the cake of leadership and baked into the reality of being human. And the more we can admit this, the better off we'll be to healing our wounds and moving on from them. No matter how healthy, skilled, or intentional you are, if you lead, you will experience moments that hurt. It's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you've showed up, that you cared about the cause enough to show up and lead others. Because when you step into influence, when you dare to be visible, not just impressive, but honest, you become vulnerable to misunderstandings, rejection, or even resistance. But here's the key. The goal isn't to avoid the wounds. It's to recognize them when they show up and to process them, not to bury them. That's how we move from leading out of rejection to leading with resilience. Because no matter who you are or what you're doing, you're a leader. Leadership shows up in everyday ways, not just in titles or formal authority. It's the mom who teaches her daughter how to speak up for herself with kindness. It's the dad who chooses presence over performance by showing up at his son's game, even after a long day at work. It's the teacher who creates space for every voice to be heard, not just the loudest. It's the manager who advocates for the burnt-out team member and shifts the culture towards sustainability. It's the entrepreneur building something that aligns with their values, even if it's slower and takes longer. And it's the friend who holds space during a hard conversation and resists the urge to fix it. These are all forms of everyday leadership. Leadership isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about influence and what you choose to do with it. It's how you treat others when no one else is watching. It's how you show up with integrity in the spaces where your voice or presence matters. And here's the thing, your presence always matters. Showing up to the conversation matters. When I think about leadership, I always come back to the core truth. Leadership isn't power over, it's power for. That's how Jesus led. He didn't manipulate outcomes. He didn't force belief. He didn't use his power to dominate or control. Instead, he invited people to come and to see, to watch, to walk alongside of him, to witness the kingdom of God in action. And when it was time, he benevolently challenged them, like in the story of the rich young ruler. Jesus offered him the truth. He named what was holding him back. But what the man did was not accept it. He walked away from it. And Jesus let him. He didn't beg or shame him into changing. He simply pointed out the obstacle in front of the one who asked him. Because leadership is not about controlling results. It's about offering the truth, being present, and offering an invitation. Jesus gave people autonomy, and that autonomy is a sacred and needed component in leadership because it roots everything in honoring another's agency, even if the outcome isn't what we hoped for. When I stepped into my first significant organizational role, I had a coach who said something that changed how I viewed leadership. He said, "Amanda, your job isn't to control outcomes. Your job is to set people up for success by raising the bar to the kind of leadership that is required for the job, and then helping them to achieve it." That meant coaching them, modeling what integrity looked like first so they had an example to look at and follow. It meant spending time with them so they could be vulnerable and transparent with their struggles and obstacles. And it also meant making space for their growth, not just their performance or what we can get out of them. That truth stuck with me because it reflected the kind of leader I wanted to be, someone who helped others authentically be the best version of themselves, someone who believed that leadership wasn't about being the star of the show. Rather, it was about raising up the next generation of leaders. And when people struggled or didn't meet expectation, my first question wasn't, What's wrong with them? It became, did I create the conditions where they could actually succeed? That mental shift changed how I interacted with people, and it made me a more compassionate and gracious leader because it took into consideration their humanity and all that was going on in their growth and in their process. Because Jesus never led with control. He led with presence, purpose, and he used his power for others, not over them. When we lead from presence, actually being present with people, not where we hope them to be or where their potential is, but where they actually are, what we're doing is creating space for them to grow, for them to speak openly and honestly, for them to heal and to take risk again. Think about it this way. Leadership is like setting the table for someone else. You pull out the chairs, you lay the plates and place the utensils, not just so things look pretty, but so someone can be nourished. You put the food on the table, something real, something sustaining, and then you step back so someone else can sit down and receive. You're not standing over them. You're not feeding them bite by bite. You're creating space where they can come as they are and grow into the leader they need to be. And as leaders, we're not called to be the centerpiece of the table, stealing the show or commanding attention. As you serve those you are leading, as you set the table, you are also raising the bar, though, for what's expected, not by force, but by design. You're not micromanaging, you're not demanding, but you're also not letting people eat like slobs. There's a sense of dignity in the space that you're creating for what is expected as a leader, but also for their own autonomy and humanity, because everyone should have a choice in their own growth. And then here's the most powerful part. You pull up a chair and eat with them. You don't just serve and supervise, you share the table. You model what it means to be present and willing to chip in and help wherever necessary. You live the very values you're inviting others into. Because leadership isn't about standing above people. It's about being with them. And I remember a day that drove this home for me. It was one of our busiest days on the job, the kind where almost everyone we served was present. Things were moving fast, there was a lot going on, and right in the middle of all of it, one of the bathrooms had a clogged toilet. Now, as a mom, I'm no stranger to handling what needs to be handled, so I checked to see if the person who usually took care of those things was available, and they weren't. So I did the next best thing. I grabbed the plunger and I got to work unclogging the toilet. It wasn't a big deal in my mind, just something that needed to be done. I didn't do it to make a point or draw attention to myself, but later several people brought it up. They said, we saw you taking care of something that seemed beneath your role. And all I could say was, nothing is beneath my role as a leader. I can unclog toilets with the best of them. Because that's what setting the table looks like. Sometimes it means getting into the dirty messiness of another person's job. It's not about keeping your hands clean. It's about creating a space and sometimes stepping into that mess, so others have the opportunity to grow and learn. That's what leadership is. It is power for, not power over. Creating space also means letting someone else finish their thought, even when you disagree. Making room at the table for voices who traditionally haven't been heard. It means asking better questions instead of always having the answers. Resisting the urge to control and instead trust the process and trust the person. Sometimes it means creating space internally, choosing not to interrupt or fix just because you're uncomfortable. And other times it's structural, inviting collaboration and slowing the pace down, or refusing to lead through fear and urgency. And that's a big thing for leaders because so often we make decisions based on fear or the tyranny of the urgent, and it clouds our decision making. So often we think we have to have all the right words, the perfect plan, or the loudest voice to lead. But more often than not, leadership is about presence, about being available, being consistent, and being grounded enough that others feel safe to be themselves around you. But don't get confused. Presence isn't passive. It's showing up to get involved in the growth of another. It says, I'm here. I see you. I'm not rushing past this moment. It's saying, I see you. I hear you. And how can I help you? Creating the space for another and then showing up looks like this in real life. It looks like sitting with your teen in silence on a hard day instead of pushing your advice, or holding your tongue in a meeting to allow others to speak, then affirming what they say. It looks like walking into a room and being the calming, non-anxious presence, even when everything around you feels chaotic. And it also looks like returning to a difficult conversation with humility instead of defensiveness, simply because you want to stay connected and you value the relationship. It's having the courage to make peace rather than keep the peace. And here's one I've experienced. I remember a moment when one of my kids was struggling to make a decision about a friendship that had become toxic. Everything in me wanted to give them the answer. I could see it so clearly. I wanted to step in and say, here's what you need to do. But in a moment of strength, I paused. And I just asked, what do you feel like is the best decision to make for you? And what are you desiring for this relationship? We sat in silence for a bit, and then they courageously answered, I don't think staying in this relationship is what is best for me or for them. That's leadership too. It looks like creating space for someone to trust themselves again, simply by being present with them in their moment of doubt. I heard someone recently say something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, and that is transformation is about the decisions we make. Small as they may seem, our decisions have the power to change the trajectory of where we go or don't go. And here's what I've come to believe. When we're courageous enough to make decisions that align with where we want to go or with who we're becoming, even before we feel fully ready or qualified, what we're doing is activating transformation. We begin living today as the version of ourselves that we're growing into. We speak up when we need to and remain silent when the situation calls for it. We walk away rather than engaging in defensive behavior. When we're living today as the version of ourselves that we're growing into, we stay put when it's easier or feels more comfortable to just leave. We invest in our own healing rather than numbing out or going to our go-to buffers. When we begin to think and make decisions as the version of ourselves that we want to be, we take the risk rather than playing it safe because we know that growth happens most when we're uncomfortable. Transformational leaders make decisions based on what their future self would do, say, or believe, not just what feels safe in the present. Because they understand that's what propels growth. That's how we become who we're meant to be. Not all at once, of course, but one bold decision at a time. And that's exactly where we're headed next. In the next episode, we'll talk about what it means to lead ourselves. Because to be able to lead others means that we first have to lead ourselves with compassion, courage, and clarity, even when no one is watching. Because the most influential leaders aren't just leading others, they've learned how to lead themselves. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've explored in today's episode concerning this concept of everyday leadership. We talked about what it meant to be an everyday leader, how leadership isn't about titles or authority, but about influence, and we all have it. And that means you're already a leader, simply because you impact the people around you through your choices, values, and presence. We took time to normalize this concept of leadership wounds, because too often we carry shame around our pain, thinking it means we failed or weren't strong enough. But the truth is, if you're a leader in one way or another, you will have or have had wounds. It's just part of showing up and being in relationship with others. We all have them, even if no one is talking about them. We also explored how true leadership is not about power over, but power for. The kind of leadership that creates space for others to grow and thrive. It's not about control, but about cultivating an environment where people can show up fully and be formed, not forced. We examined also how leadership happens at the table. When we raise the bar with dignity, model the values that we hold, and sometimes even get into the mess of unclogging toilets, real leadership shows up in a humble, everyday act of service and presence. And we ended it all with a look at how courageous, future-oriented decisions can shape the lives that we're building. How choosing in alignment with who we want to become, even before you feel fully ready, is actually the beginning of transformation. As we conclude, let's take some time to become personal about what we're hearing, because change doesn't happen until we make it personal and deal with the present. And starting with acknowledgement and celebration is a good place to start. So let me ask you, where are you already leading without giving yourself credit? Who are the people that God has placed you in relationship with? Where do you have an opportunity to influence them for the positive or the negative? And where might you be invited to raise the bar and lead with presence? Not just supervision, but a shared purpose of their growth. Where are you using your influence to create space for others rather than to control the outcomes? And what bold decision is stirring inside of you? One that your future self would thank you for making. And lastly, what are the unspoken wounds that need to be normalized? What are the wounds that need to be felt and named and accepted, and then tended so they no longer hold you back? When we talk about this concept of leadership, the opportunity to influence another, to be a part of another person's growth and potential, it is an incredible privilege that we should not take for granted. I'm deeply grateful for the ones who poured into me and invested in my journey. People like mentors and coaches and leaders and also friends. Each one of them in their own unique way gave me a piece of themselves. Their wisdom, their "don't do that, it doesn't work" stories, they gave me themselves as they poured into me. To be involved in another person's flourishing is a gift, and one that should never be taken lightly. If you're longing for that kind of presence in your life, someone to walk with you, to challenge and support you as you lead from a place of authenticity, I'd love to invite you into coaching with me. I offer several different coaching packages, one of which is a signature Authentically You journey. It's a 12-week experience designed to help you live and lead with confidence, clarity, and alignment with who your true self is. Through personalized sessions, we'll walk together through themes like aligned decision-making, honest communication, and healthy boundaries. We'll talk about self-trust and emotional awareness, and letting go of perfection and people-pleasing. We'll also talk about meaningful rhythms for everyday life, and how you can own your story, speak your truth, and live into a wholehearted connection with who you truly are. This journey isn't about adding one more thing to your plate. It's about coming home to who you really are. You don't need a title to lead, and you don't need to keep performing to be worthy. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about all of this, check out my website at authenticallyu.org, and let's start a conversation that could change the trajectory of your life. You can also find a bunch of free resources on my website, including my free morning meditation. It's an 8-minute practice to start and ground yourself in God's voice before the day begins and the world begins to demand things of you. Thanks for tuning in to The Leadership Wound. I'm glad you're here and I'm excited to continue this journey with you. If you're ready to stop performing and start leading authentically, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if this episode resonated with you or even another episode, leave a review and help others to find their way back to living and leading with greater confidence, purpose, and clarity. Until next time, lead like you.